Joining us now, great to welcome to our Book Talk segment today, man who's written a book that's going to help a lot of people, I'm sure. It's called The ADHD Advantage. What you thought was a diagnosis may be your greatest strength. We're joined by Dr. Dale Archer today, and he is a medical director for the psychiatric services at Lake Charles Memorial Hospital in Louisiana. He joined us by telephone. And Doctor, good to have you with us. How are you?
Good to be here.
Had a chance to read through the book. I was a little surprised about the statistics. 10% now of children are being diagnosed with ADHD. That's a high number, isn't it?
Actually, since the book was written, even though it's coming out today, the statistic has gone up to 11% over the last year. So, yeah, it keeps going up, and that's a U.S. statistic, which is one of the problems that we're dealing with here, because if you look at the U.K., it's 2%. You look at France, it's about 0.5%. Even within the United States, go out to Nevada, you're at 5.8%, and Louisiana is 16%. So there's a wide variability in what is, unfortunately, a very subjective diagnosis.
Yeah, I remember when I was in elementary school and even in high school, there was always a couple of kids that, you call them hyper back then, but it seems like there's much more today with this. Do we know why the statistics have gone up? I guess that's still being studied, right?
Well, it's being overdiagnosed is, of course, the main reason, but the reason why is multifactorial. And you've got a $9 billion pharmaceutical industry that's the money they make currently on the sales of the stimulants that treat ADHD. You've got a pop-a-pill psychiatry mentality. You've got overworked teachers that have one or two difficult kids and they can't handle the class. You've got stressed out parents. And then you've got our cultural mindset today, which is immediate gratification. I want to feel better now. I want to fix. I don't care what I have to take or what I have to do, but I want it right now. I don't want to do any therapy. I don't want to do anything that's going to take time or effort. I just want to feel better. So all of those things together, I think, have led to the overdiagnosis, the overtreatment, and the overmedication of ADHD.
And the premise of the book, we want to be clear to people listening. I mean, if you are diagnosed with this and you have it, you can use that to your advantage in your life and your work. And you yourself, I know, in the book, you talk about your own dealing with this as well. So you've had to deal with this your whole life, right?
I'm an ADHDer, and fortunately for me, I went to school before the diagnosis even made it into the psychiatric manual. And another scary stat is that ADHD, which back in the day was known as ADD, didn't even make it into the psychiatric diagnostic manual until 1980. So wow. In the last 35 years, we've gone from 0 cases to 11% of kids between 5 and 17 with this diagnosis. Thank goodness I was in school before 1980, well before 1980, I might add, and so I didn't face the possibility of being slapped on meds, but I had a difficult time. I was a behavioral problem. I always had below average in conduct and was sent to the principal and all the usual things. I was smart enough so that I did okay academically, luckily for me, so, yeah, I've had it my whole life. And, as with most ADHDers, especially the successful ones, you figure out the strategies and you build your life around your traits as opposed to trying to medicate certain traits out of existence.
Is it a difficulty in concentrating on one particular thing? You talk about in the book how people with ADHD basically multitask. They're concentrating on many things at once. That kind of makes them seem like they're not focusing on one thing. They're doing so many things at once. Is that the issue, basically?
Well, there's two. It's a little more complex than that, because the ADHD brain gets very bored with routine tasks. And, of course, what could be more boring than sitting in a classroom for 8 hours a day and having to take subjects which you really don't care about? So for the average kid, that's boring. For the ADHD brain, it's virtually almost insurmountable. It's just, it drives us to the point of hyperactivity, essentially. But two interesting facts. So with things that we don't like or routine tasks, they become boring very easily to us, and we can't focus on them. But if we find something that we love, then we can kick into what's called hyperfocus. And in the hyperfocus mode, the ADHDer can focus on this one particular task forever. I mean, days, weeks, months. Examples abound. David Neilman, who's the founder of JetBlue, is probably a classic example, who barely made it through school, had difficulty with concentration, focus, behavioral problems, the whole bit, gets out, falls in love with the airline industry, and starts thinking about creative ways to do it differently. The next thing you know, he's founded his own airline. And I'm interviewing him, and he goes, how in the world could a brain like mine, who could barely get through school, who could barely write a letter, who could barely focus or concentrate on any type of subject, be able to focus so hard and so long and so intensely on this one industry that I came up with a whole new way of doing things? And so that speaks to hyper-focus. You find what you love as an ADHDer, and the hyper-focus kicks in, and of course it's limitless. And then coupled with that is the fact that because we get bored easily with one thing, if we're not hyper-focusing, well, then the next best thing is to multitask. Mm-hmm. So rather than focusing on trying to concentrate on one thing we don't like, put 3 or 4 things in there, and then we can shift enough in between them so that all of a sudden it's not so boring, and all of a sudden we can perform very well at it.
Yeah, great story about him. I didn't realize that the background of Neilman, because I didn't know he had a couple airlines before that. So that's interesting. And one in Brazil, right?
Well, now he's living in Brazil now. He lives in Sao Paulo now, and he has Azul Airlines.
Right after that, right after JetBlue, right? He went to Brazil.
That was after JetBlue. Yeah. Before that, he actually did own another airline before he founded JetBlue, and then he came up with an idea for the paperless ticket. So he had an idea for that, and that didn't pan out, and when the airlines started doing it themselves. But anyway, so he was involved in it and just was in love with it. He was fascinated by it. And so my advice, and I interviewed dozens of ADHDers in the book, and what they've all told me is, you don't know ahead of time what you're going to fall in love with. It's trial and error. So you try multiple things, and finally you find that one thing you go, wow, I love this. This is what I want to do. And that's the eureka moment.
Okay, you have an interview in there with most people probably know, Howie Mandel, who's been open about dealing with it himself. But I think you see this trait, and you talk about it in the book, entrepreneurs. Many of them have this trait, whether they're diagnosed with it or not, who knows, but they have this trait anyway. They get hyper-focused, and they're able to stay with one thing and make it happen, right?
Well, obviously David Neilman being the classic case of the entrepreneur. There are multiple entrepreneurs in the book. There's a whole chapter on entrepreneurship in the book. Entrepreneurism really does draw the ADHDer because as an entrepreneur, you're starting something new and from scratch, and no one really knows where that's going to go. So you've got that uncertainty. And, even though we get bored easily, we're very cool in a crisis. So we do very well when there's turmoil and crisis and stress all around us. What could be more stressful than starting your own business? There's the functional impulsivity. Normally we think of impulsivity as being bad, but impulsivity works very well for an entrepreneur, where it's better to act, even if you're wrong, than not to act at all, because you have a better chance for success if you act. And by definition, analyzing something that is brand new and never been done before, you don't really know how that's going to turn out. So the impulsivity, normally perceived as a negative in ADHD, can actually be a positive in the entrepreneur.
As you become an adult and get older, do you find in your own case, doctor, in statistics, that it gets easier for people that have this, maybe to kind of figure out a way? Maybe you don't get to where, totally get rid of it, but you can focus better. Can you learn it, or what happens?
Well, what happens, and I think that there's an important distinction. We're not talking about overcoming your ADHD. We're talking about building your life around your traits, not trying to become someone you're not.
Right.
So if you have the ADHD brain and you go into accounting, you're probably going to be very disappointed. If you go into an office job where you go in at 8, you leave at 5, you sit behind a cube all day, you're probably going to be disappointed. That's not something that an ADHDer is going to do well at. But as we go through life, you tend to learn the tricks of what you're good at, what you like doing, how you perform at your best, different study techniques that work well for you and perhaps wouldn't work for others. So you learn all that, and you're building your life as you go through trial and error. What I'm hoping my book is going to allow ADHD parents to do and ADHDers that are adults to do is to be able to say, wow, these are the advantages. Let me see what I can get my child involved in where the advantages become helpful as opposed to a hindrance. And as an adult, what are the careers that are going to work well? these are my strengths, these are my weaknesses, what's going to work well for me? So it becomes this voyage where through trial and error and understanding, but I think the book can be a jump start because if you go, okay, well, these are the advantages, this is what I do well, you know, I'm intuitive, I'm creative, I can multitask, I can hyper-focus, I'm athletic, I'm resilient, then I can build my life around those strengths and not try to get involved in something which I'm probably not going to be good at, which is, you know, a tedious, routine performance in some field.
Yeah. Well, great advice in the book. Again, it's called The ADHD Advantage, and we're talking with Dr. Dale Archer today. And Dale, I know the book just came out, but getting some good press. Do you have a website you want to direct people to, get more information or get the book?
Yeah, the book's available at all the brick-and-mortar stores. It's available at all the online stores, and you can find out more about it on my website, drdalearcher.com. I've got a Facebook page, Dr. Dale Archer, where there's a lot of discussion about the book that's going on right now. Twitter page is also Dr. Dale Archer. So any of those venues. And if you have any questions, feel free to shoot me one through social media. I answer all the questions that come through.
Great. Doctor, pleasure talking to you. Enjoyed the book, and hopefully we can talk to you again. Thanks for joining us.
Great. Thank you so much.
If you'd like to order the book we're talking about, please go to DougMilesMedia.com and enter the author's name in the Amazon search box. Thank you for listening. Please come back soon for more conversations here at DougMilesMedia.com.
This has been a presentation of Doug Miles Media, all rights reserved. You can listen to or download previous programs at iTunes, Stitcher.com, or Doug Miles.